Paradox ends City Skylines 2. Who could have predicted this? Who would have known that City Skylines 2, you know, the half-baked thing that got released on a whim just to make money, would ever encounter any problems? You're just a hater, I hear you say. True, true. But I'm also right.
Today's stories are pretty darn frustrating one. I've got to start it off with a quote. Here's the quote. The quarter's game releases have not held the quality we want. That is the verdict of Paradox CEO Frederick Wester during their end-of-year report, where he's reflecting on the frustrations the players had with City Skylines 2 at launch. Now, the release of City Skylines 2 is certainly profitable for Paradox, but looking at the numbers and the way that Paradox are now talking about it to investors, it's pretty darn clear that they are now happy to sandbag the game's reception as a mistake being made with lessons learned. But
you know what's the most ironic thing about this, by the way? When City Skylines came out, it was a niche thing. It was not known as the big city builder. It was actually still Sim City or whatever you wanted to call that game, right? You know why City Skylines broke out and became the big thing, by the way? It's because they released after Sim City, and SimCity was just absolutely atrocious and horrible and was 3 steps backwards from the previous version of the game. And City Skylines comes out and it's decent quality and people like it. And thus, City Skylines became the big thing. And now they're releasing half-baked garbage, so someone else can become the big thing. Now that's dedication.
that doesn't change the fact that analysis actually suggests that City Skylines 2 was rushed out to paper over cracks of a weak quarter for the company. Because, as you all know, at any cost, the line must go up. When ours does,
True.
It means job security, means pay rises, not this bullshit. And by the way, you can help our line with today's sponsor. Right, here's the deal. It's time for America to do a politics. So, as we watch on, I'm going to be using ground.news/bellular to satisfy...
Sounds stupid.
Bit blunt, but damn if it ain't true, that's where the beans go. Okay, let's talk about things. Per their financial report, City Skylines 2 sold 1 million copies. That's really good. It helped them to drive revenues, even though what they had to do was eat a lovely operating loss from the writing off of Lamplighters League, because Lamplighters League did not do very well. It does seem that it wasn't exactly cheap to make. Overall, then, revenues are
yeah, it's literally just a knockoff of Commandos. Hey, if you want to play a Commandos type of game, you just play the original Commandos 1, 2, or 3. 3 is a little bit niche, I guess, but you know, still, the point being.
Great. I mean, actually, take a look. They are the highest that they've been in quarters, and thinking about the line, obviously, the line that we all live by, operating profits have not dropped below it. Now, yes, it's a quarterly drop, sure.
I mean, if you see the line here and then it goes there, you're like, ah, bad, really, really, really bad. What the hell? What is this? This is really bad. So it is what it is.
But it's nowhere near as bad as it could have been. So you might think, all right, there's some wins, there's some losses, whatever, we'll move on to the next quarter, try to be happy. But what is even more curious is what, yes, Mr. Frederick Wester said on the reception of the game. We really didn't meet player expectations when it comes to performance or the releasing consoles, which
really
didn't happen. Some of the functionalities, including modding, was lacking as well, where yes, they weren't able to ship with mods. And just so you're caught up in that, by the way, City Skylines is just an incredibly modded game. There was even drama around that where the modding would be happening like on a Paradox modding platform rather than in Steam Workshop. Now, they said that's because they want to unify everything between console and PC, which I do understand, but for a lot of people, Steam Workshop's pretty damn handy, right? And for a game like City Skylines, it's extremely important. It's a sort of game that I would say is multiplicative in creativity. It's the idea that the more different types of Lego blocks you give a player, you know, you're not just adding new things that they could build, you're almost multiplying them because of how the possibility space expands. And that's one of the reasons why mods, even just custom assets, if you want to make, say, a British city for some reason, I guess.
Who would want to do something like that? That sounds pain. I don't want people to just get, you know, stabbed on the street for no reason. There must be a reason.
Yeah, it's like that. He said, "We still sold well because the underlying game is really good. So we sold over 1 million copies after the end of the quarter. We're now working really hard on improving things, including performance, and we are going to develop the game for many years to come. City Skylines 2 is one of our long-term engagements and one of our most important franchises as well." Now, this is with the specific framing of, quote, the core...
Bruh, you know what that actually means? That means that they're gonna release a bunch of expansions that are not gonna be worth their money at all. That's typically what it means. Because in City Skylines, there's just so much shit that you don't need to buy. It's actually a waste of money.
Quarter's game releases have not held the quality that we want. Now, that is partially referring to the Lamplighters League. It's also referring to smaller titles like Star Trek Infinite, the sales of which were certainly not. Essentially, it was inspired by a really, really big mod for Stellaris, but it's one of those things where, you know, you do it officially, and turns out you don't really hold parity with the mod, and then people are kind of like, okay, well, this is the official version, but it's worse. Why have you done this? I think the idea of, if you're going to do it, fully do it, but also it's very, very hard to compete with modders, actually. And maybe that's something we'll talk about another day. Anyway, what this is really referring to, though, is City Skylines 2. It's a game that Paradox chose to release, and that's why this is getting to be its own video. Because the point here, everything that Mr. Wester is saying is sort of the fault of him and his board, or, you know, whoever the key decision makers are. Yeah, kind of their fault. We're going to get into that. So these rough results, I mean, a 75 average is good, but only half recommending. And certainly if you took a look at YouTube, pretty much everyone is saying, look, there's great potential here, but don't buy it right now. And even with all of that, it's still...
Yeah, that's what everyone understood at the start. That's reasonable.
Still did pretty well. I mean, come on, city builders, they've been pretty, pretty strong these days, even with some very negative, user criticisms, pretty disastrous Steam review scores. Ultimately, for many, yeah, you might have criticisms, but the thing that matters is if the line goes up, and they did get sales. The thing, though, is the criticisms are still mounting. Content creators and fans are losing patience because Colossal Order are still trying to actually catch their momentum again. This is one of the...
What do you mean, trying to catch their momentum? Dude, no one's trying to catch any momentums or anything. People are just pissed because... How long has the game been out, even, at this point? A year or something? Half a year. Or, yeah, half a year-ish, maybe. And, well, it's still just a disaster area. In a lot of aspects. The graphics are not to snuff, nothing's up to snuff, honestly. The simulation of everything is kind of like hingy dog shit most of the time. It's just not good on most accounts. Now, there are people who obviously really, really like these type of games, and they're gonna play it, sure, fine. But that's not the core audience that any company is actually trying to get. No company is going to make a game like this and say, yes, we're going to hit the 5% of the market that really likes our games, and no one else does because they're desperate to play a game like this. And the average person is going to think that this is shit. Yeah, that's not happening. And, well, the average person still doesn't really play City Skylines 2 with a lot of enthusiasm.
Massive problems that you have, and we've talked about it before with live service games. Take, say, Anthem, right? Or any of those live services where the game comes out and it's effectively so scuffed that they've got to start delaying the actual live service seasons because they need to fix up the game first. Or an example like Halo Infinite, where they released the game and then they said, okay, bit of a problem, guys. We are not set up to actually run the live service that Microsoft have tasked us with running. Therefore, what we need to do is sort of rebuild our team, our processes, our pipelines, and then by the time, of course, they actually do get caught up, guess what happens? People have moved on to something else, and sadly, Halo...
They never caught up. That's first of all for Halo. Second of all, the game was just bad. It actually... Did it even have any of those problems? I kind of don't remember. Is this what he means? It's the decisions of the top? Because no one at the top, came to Halo 5 in the last minute before they released and said, oh, by the way, add always online stuff. No, it was built from the ground up with that. Okay? I hate this when people for no reason just blame the ridiculously millionaire billionaire CEOs for making these decisions. No CEO is actually going down to the people who work at the game because they probably don't even know what the game is about that they actually own. It's pretty typical, as funny as that is, by the way. And well, they just say, hey, we need microtransaction battle pass options, or well, they don't actually even say that, honestly. They just essentially talk about what kind of implementations each department does for the game and things like that. The CEOs don't just actually go assemble everyone and say, we're adding a microtransaction battle pass pay to win style. Do it. They don't say that. They don't. Someone from a department just needs to add more things to the game, more ways of earning money potentially, and whatnot, and they just add it. It's not the CEO, it's the department heads typically who do that because they are in charge of creating things like that, and they don't tell the people who are making the combat experience, hey, make the combat experience worse so we can sell more levels in the battle pass. They don't do that. Typically. Now, there are some situations where they do cut out things from the actual game and add to like these battle passes and DLCs and whatnot, but that's typically kind of not the way that things should happen or do happen. Now, again, there are times when that does happen, but most of the time this is just BS. Most of the time it's just developers being incompetent and making bad games.
Infinite did not do as well as it should have. The core game improvements and the modding tools are not out yet.
Yeah, like, did you see those graphics right there? Do you see these wonderful...
Do as well as it should have. The core...
Do you see these wonderful non-existing graphics? The CEO didn't come down and say, hey, make the graphics worse. He didn't. Shocking, I know, but yeah, that's not how the world functions.
Game improvements and the modding tools are not out yet, and the reason why is, well, unfortunately the developers have been stuck fixing launch problems. The thing is, if your launch happens when you are ready and as you have planned, what happens? Well, your immediate future after that launch is going to be a lot more certain, because guess what? You've not had to spend ages firefighting problems. And the thing is, this is an instance where they chose to release this game when they did. There is, we're going to look at the balance sheet and the stonks, because we all do love the line and whether it goes up or down, but there's also change they have implemented for future titles here. Now, just to give a sort of like, or get a temperature of that community and the sort of lost potential here, Biffa is one of the people who does like a lot of city builder content, a lot of City Skylines. The guy's...
Oh, actually, I have even watched a video of this, I think.
Got like thousands of hours. Like, it is totally his jam. Now, in a recent video he released, he was chatting about how, a lot of people in the content creation scene were kind of thinking like, okay, big new game, I guess our numbers will go up. And they haven't actually found that as much. And it was interesting going through Biff's video. I mean, number one, he speaks about how a lot of the deep simulation systems that exist, it's like they exist, but they don't matter. At the end of the day,
Yeah. I don't play City Skylines, but I have already heard that. I even mentioned it. Yeah, the simulations are not real, actually. So, if you're some kind of financist and you think, yes, I'm gonna destroy the world's economy on X by doing this, and then none of that happens because the simulation's not real. As much as I understand it, by the way, the simulation is so not real in this case. Numbers go up and numbers go down is random. Yeah. It's literally almost random as when does number go up or when does number go down. Nothing happens, they just move because reasons.
Doesn't really matter like how much complexity is there under the hood if the result is effectively the same. So he's had a lot of issues on game tuning essentially, and this is always the problem that runs into me with park sim games and sort of city games. It's probably why the likes of a Frostpunk probably suits me more, but you just end up with money being absolutely like no obstacle. But then the problem is, when that's left over, he's saying, well, as somebody who's super into this series, who does themed builds, where a lot of those themed builds like will actually help drive him in YouTube, basically he's like, yeah, well, we don't have the mods. There is not much that we can do. So even within the City Skylines sort of creator scene, well, they're actually very limited in what they can do because there's so little, sort of content and diversity there. He goes on to talk about, views and that kind of thing, where people would have expected, big new entry in the franchise, way more views. Or maybe people would have expected, oh, big drama, way more views. Yeah.
Yeah, typically. I mean, when I covered this first, people were pissed because it was a bunch of fanboys who said, now City Skylines 2 is gonna be great. You stop saying bad things about it. But it did get a decent amount of views. The drama definitely was on point.
You actually take a look on Social Blade, and the scales are a bit messed up here just because of how these, count some things if you end up, like, deleting content on the channel. But anyway, Blade. You can see, like, he's kind of in the sort of the 2 million to 3 million range. And yeah, it does bump up to 4 million in and around launch.
That's pretty good. So he's, making at least super at least 10K a month, right?
It does all just kind of go right back down again. And it just sort of shows, like, you've had your big new release, but what are people actually playing? What are they interested in? Now, if we actually zoom out to do a different comparison, you start to see the sort of damage done to the community. So
it's actually still pretty decent player amount, to be honest. Again, it's a playable game, but this is such a short cry from what it should have been. The game didn't release half-baked, it released 1/4 baked.
Number 1, City Skylines 2. Well, this certainly is not line go up, this is line go down. 100,000 players on launch, that's sitting, right now, like 6,600, as I said. So that's pretty...
Well, yeah, the launch drop-off here, as you can see, was very drastic because... The game, one of the biggest issues when the game launched was the fact that some people could not actually play it because the game just got completely stuttery and laggy after just a couple of hours. And most PCs could not handle the population size when it grew to a certain level. I don't remember what it was, like maybe 100,000 or maybe a million. No, a million's too much. But, close to 100K, I think it was, and the game just completely eradicated itself. It didn't matter how good a machine you had or whatever, but it was just sad. And again, the graphics were just dog, okay?
Be rough. Thing is, though, when we go and take a look at the original game, City Skylines, we actually see, so this is a far, larger graph. Look at January 2023, 41,000 players. You can see the game's really doing well there. We keep on going. By September 2020...
Yeah, it has a bunch of expansions that are absolutely stupid and useless that you should not buy. Just Google or go on YouTube and find a video that explains which expansion you should and shouldn't buy. Because some of them are really, really bad, and you should never buy them. But, it's a good game. City Skylines 2, the ironic thing is, if City Skylines 2 would have, probably stewed in a pot for a year or two more, it would have been a really good game. Because there is a lot to make City Skylines 2 really, really good. But sadly, that was not an option.
23, so that's when the new game's coming out. You're dealing with, peak players of like 34, 35,000. Of course, this is a time where people will have had, loads of preview videos for City Skylines 2. That'll probably make them think, I'll give the old game, one more shot. And then even this number dwindles and dwindles and dwindles to the point where in December 2023, its peak is 16,000.
By the way, why does this number dwindle so much? Pretty simple, honestly. Well, it's just the fact that, the new City Skylines was released. People who played the old City Skylines go play City Skylines 2. It's bad, but they don't want to play the old game because, you kind of want to play the new game because it's new and whatnot, and there are better things in it than in the original one. But yeah, huge problems as always.
And you would think, like, December, holidays, playing, sort of city sim game, all just sort of seems to make sense. But no, you just see that these numbers have actually dwindled and real damage has been done to this brand. Now, let's take a look at some of the financial stuff. So I've got three things here. I've got 250 million Swedish krona into USD. That will become relevant later. I've got Paradox's stocks, and I've got their earnings report. So if you actually look at their stocks, you can see if you go back to 5 years, I mean, number one, look at that, August 2023, 307 krona for one stock, and look at that absolutely humongous drop that happens through September and October. And when we zoom in on that a little bit more, you see August 2023, you know, stuff's looking pretty good. I suppose a lot of those, you know, the market wasn't quite in its very dire state that it's, or, you know, at least the sort of chatter about games, it's not in the dire state that it's in very much right now. And you can see what happens. So we see that go down. Obviously, things are looking pretty rough. We've got Lamplighters League to talk about. Now, on the 11th of October, we see the write-down for that game. Well, that sends, of course, the line down even further. The impact of Lamplighters League before, on profit, before tax, is minus 250 million Swedish krona, which does turn out to be about 24 million USD. So, yeah, that's all kind of rough. And of course, while this was announced, when it was announced, they pretty much would have known that there was problems like quite a bit ago. So overall, pretty rough. Really bad announcement on the 11th of October, and for some reason they say, okay, well, they look at City Skylines 2, and they think, right, that's fine.
I mean, most people don't want to look at City Skylines 2 because this is what you see. It's pretty shit.
Fine, we can continue with this plan. And I get that there's a degree of sunk cost whenever you're ramping up for a marketing strategy. You know, you've already had it in the hands of all the influencers and the press and all of that for ages, but ultimately, you still can say, nope, this is not going to be good. They did not have to release that quarter. They wanted to.
Bro, look at how this woman's walking. Like, what's wrong with her?
Because as they say, it is one of their company's core brands, and with that, they could at least guarantee some sales that would balance out the risk of the smaller titles like Star Trek Infinite or very large write-offs like that of Lamplighters League. So ultimately, those who wanted a city manager were in fact victims of them playing a balance sheet manager, which is unfortunate. Now, there's a little bit of good news here in that they have kind of learned. So, Lives by You is their competitor to The Sims. It's from Paradox Teutonic, and it's
Oh. Yeah, I have never heard of that game.
been delayed again, right? It was scheduled for launch in September 2023. So imagine that. September, I mean, you got Stellaris, September would have been Lamplighters, and this game followed up in October by, followed up in October by City Skylines 2, which was pretty much a disaster in its launch. And I mean, I've heard some real rumbly things about how Paradox have ran just some other projects as well, with being pretty damn, like, mercenary.
This looks pretty bad, not gonna lie.
But like to the point where it's kind of them hurting themselves. Maybe things truly have changed, but could you imagine how much of a disaster that quarter would have been if they really did all of that? But now it's going to be June 2024. What do we make out of this? Because this is a game that had the same release window as what, as roughly when City Skylines 2 was going to come out. I mean, when should Skylines 2 have been delayed? Maybe another year? I mean, you've got the likes of, say, Biffa, who, I mean, yeah, he's really good at games like that because he's played them a lot, but he shouldn't be saying, yeah, actually, a lot of these new systems, the economy and stuff, they don't really matter. Well, maybe he wouldn't be saying that if this game had enough time in the oven. So anyway,
wait, is that the same woman?
This game had
It is! Isn't it? You know, this spot.
Enough time in the oven. So anyway, Lives by You, it was initially delayed
That's nice.
by 6 months to March, and then it's been delayed for another 3 months now to June. And it's kind of hard to look.
Okay, what the hell was this, by the way, Potbelly? You show this line go down, okay, and that's it? The line go down? No explanation. What? Why? I mean, okay, I'm done. Anyway, that was Billiard News. City Skylines 2. Oh, gee, I wish someone could have called this happening. Oh, wait, I did. It is what it is. Anyway, this was Chris Sensei. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. Haven't done already, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.